Most people don't work for money. Money works on them. It controls their emotions. It dictates their self-worth. It whispers to them at night that they are not enough, not valuable, not secure. Today, we break that spell. Because Machiavelli understood one thing that modern society desperately hides. The moment you become emotionally attached to money, you lose all power over it. And Erich Fromm, one of the deepest minds of modern psychology, reveals the other half of the truth. You either live in having mode or being mode. Most people are trapped in the first, slaves to possessions, chained to the fear of loss, blinded by the illusion of more. So let me ask you right now, do you own money or does money own you? If you choose power instead of fear, comment, "I choose power." The world taught you to earn. I'm here to teach you to rule. Most people walk through life believing their value comes from the approval of others. A boss, a paycheck, a title, a system that was designed long before they were born. And because they believe this, they spend their entire existence begging for an opportunity, waiting for someone to choose them, promote them, validate them, or discover them. Society conditions you to think that your value must be granted, not generated. But this is the root of powerlessness. Machiavelli would call this dependence a quiet form of slavery, because when another person can decide your worth, they don't just control your income, they control your emotions, your confidence, your identity. They own the psychological leash you don't even realize you're wearing. And the tragedy is that most people never break it. They keep waiting to be noticed, waiting to be appreciated, waiting to be chosen. But power does not blossom from waiting. Power is born from creation. Erich Fromm warned that modern society traps people in the illusion of having a job title, having a role, having approval. But none of these things create real value. Real value comes from becoming someone others cannot ignore, someone who builds, produces, influences, leads, someone who is not picked but needed. When you create instead of beg, everything changes. People stop seeing you as an option and start seeing you as an asset. They become aware that without you, something breaks. That's where leverage begins. Because value is not measured by how many people like you. It's measured by how many people cannot afford to lose you. The moment you stop looking outward for validation and start looking inward for creation, the world responds differently. You stop playing the game as a participant and start shaping the game as an architect. You stop asking, "Who will give me a chance?" and begin declaring, "Who deserves the results I create?" Society told you to wait for permission. Machiavelli tells you to build something so essential that permission becomes irrelevant. Money is one of the most dangerous addictions in the world, not because people want it, but because they worship it. They fall in love with it. They attach their worth, their identity, their confidence, even their happiness to the numbers in their bank account. And when money becomes your emotional anchor, you no longer own it. It owns you. Machiavelli warned rulers never to love what can be taken away, because the moment your heart clings to something fragile, you hand your enemies the blueprint to destroy you. Money is fragile. Power is not. Most people don't understand this. They chase money with desperation, thinking that if they grind hard enough, hustle long enough, sacrifice everything, they'll finally feel secure. But the truth is brutal. Money can disappear overnight. Inflation, layoffs, recessions, betrayals. One unexpected event and your entire identity collapses. That is the curse of attachment. Erich Fromm's analysis of modern life makes this painfully clear. People cling to possessions because they believe those possessions protect them from fear. But the fear never leaves, it only shifts shape. A person who loves money fears losing it. A person who serves money fears scarcity. A person whose identity is tied to money fears becoming invisible if the flow ever stops. But a person in pursuit of power thinks differently. Power is internal, strategic, psychological. Power means you can rebuild, reposition, and regain what was lost, because your value does not depend on external conditions. When you choose power, money becomes a tool, not a master. You make decisions from clarity, not fear. You take bold actions without emotional panic. You negotiate without desperation bleeding through your voice. You stop chasing opportunities and begin selecting them like a ruler, choosing which alliances deserve your presence. Detachment doesn't mean rejecting wealth. It means controlling the emotional strings that wealth tries to pull. The less you need money emotionally, the more money flows toward you strategically. That is the paradox of earning. That is the mindset of a sovereign thinker. People are taught to calculate their worth based on effort, time, or self-perception. They believe they are valuable because they try hard, because they're loyal, because they care. But in the real world, value isn't defined by effort. It's defined by demand. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Power doesn't belong to the most talented or the most hardworking. It belongs to the person whose absence would create chaos, the person others cannot afford to lose, the person whose presence shifts the balance of outcomes. Think about it. A business does not pay someone more because they are a good person. It pays more because losing them would hurt. Society teaches you to focus on impressing people, but Machiavelli teaches you to focus on becoming irreplaceable. Erich Fromm adds another layer by explaining how society conditions the individual to have value instead of being value. People try to accumulate degrees, titles, and achievements as proof they matter. But none of that ensures power. Power comes from becoming the kind of person who changes the outcome simply by being involved. Demand is psychological. It's about leverage. Once others rely on your skills, your judgment, your insight, your ability to solve problems they cannot solve, your value multiplies. Suddenly, you don't chase opportunities. They chase you. You don't negotiate from need. You negotiate from control. People stop evaluating whether they like you and start calculating the cost of losing you. That is when the dynamic shifts. That is when you begin to understand your true worth. And this is where most people fail. They think being agreeable makes them valuable. It doesn't. Being necessary makes you valuable. Being a source of rare solutions makes you valuable. Being someone whose contribution cannot be easily replicated makes you valuable. You rise in life not because you shout louder, but because your absence creates a vacuum people fear. That fear is leverage. That leverage is power. And that power is how you escape the trap of begging for recognition and step into the position of being recognized automatically. Silence is one of the most underestimated forms of power in the modern world. People think success today requires being loud, constantly talking, announcing every plan, broadcasting every move. But Machiavelli would laugh at this modern obsession with noise. He understood that the strongest strategies are forged in secrecy. The most dangerous plans grow in silence. The most powerful individuals speak rarely, but act decisively. Noise is for the insecure. Silence is for the strategic. In a society addicted to oversharing, your silence becomes your shield. It protects your intentions from being sabotaged. It prevents your enemies from predicting your next step. It keeps your competitors blind, confused, and off balance. When people don't know what you're doing, they can't interfere, manipulate, or undermine you. Silence creates a psychological fog where others cannot read your direction, and uncertainty is one of the greatest weapons you can wield. People fear what they cannot anticipate. They respect what they cannot fully access. Erich Fromm explains that modern individuals cling to visibility because they believe attention equals worth. They feel unseen if they are not constantly expressing themselves. But this need to broadcast is exactly what drains their power. The moment you reveal everything you're working on, you hand the world a map of your vulnerabilities. Every dream you share becomes a target. Every plan you announce becomes a point of pressure. Every goal you disclose becomes a tool someone else can use against you. But when you choose silence, you move differently. People don't get the chance to doubt you publicly. They don't get to discourage you. They don't get to poison your ambition with their insecurity. You act without noise, without permission, without resistance. Your results become your announcement. Your achievements become your voice. And when you finally reveal what you've built, the world is forced to react on your terms, not theirs. Silence is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of control. Availability is one of the most misunderstood forms of currency. People think being accessible, responsive, and constantly present makes them reliable. But in reality, being always available makes you forgettable. Machiavelli understood that scarcity creates value, and abundance destroys it. Human psychology is simple. The more frequently something appears, the less impact it has. The more someone can get you, the less they respect you. The more time you give away for free, the more people assume it has no worth. Look at how society trains you. Be polite, be agreeable, be always ready to help, be there for everyone. And where does that lead? To exhaustion, to being taken for granted, to being undervalued, unnoticed, and underpaid. Because people subconsciously assume that anything constantly available must be cheap. Scarcity creates desire, scarcity creates curiosity, scarcity creates leverage. When you limit your access, your presence becomes a privilege, not an expectation. Erich Fromm would say that people cling to being constantly available because they fear rejection. They fear that if they step back, they'll be forgotten. They fear that if they say no, they'll lose approval. But this dependency is exactly why they remain powerless. When you fear losing people, people control you. When you fear being less available, you train others to expect you at their convenience. But when you reclaim your time, your space, your boundaries, something shifts dramatically. People begin to notice your absence. They begin to question what you're doing, where you are, and why you're not easily reached. That curiosity elevates your perceived value. Scarcity is not about playing hard to get. It's about teaching the world that your time is royal, that your attention is earned, not given, that your presence is intentional, not automatic. The moment you stop letting people access you whenever they want, you begin to control the dynamic of every relationship you enter, professionally, socially, emotionally. You stop being a background character in someone else's life and become a force whose presence carries weight. Most people learn skills for one reason: survival. They learn just enough to get hired, just enough to get by, just enough to not fall behind. But Machiavelli would call this a losing strategy, because survival skills keep you alive, but mastery skills make you untouchable. The world does not reward the average. It rewards the exceptional. And yet, society conditions you to stay just competent enough to remain dependent on the system. True power comes from mastering abilities that elevate you above competition, above circumstance, above the fragile structure of the marketplace. When you commit to mastery, you separate yourself from the crowd. You stop competing horizontally with people who are all learning the same basic things. Instead, you rise vertically into a realm where there are fewer competitors, fewer comparisons, and far more opportunities. Erich Fromm would explain that people avoid mastery because they fear the responsibility it demands. Mastery forces you to become someone new, disciplined, focused, relentless. And many would rather stay average than face the discomfort of transformation. But here is the Machiavellian truth. Mastery is not about talent. It is about obsession. It's about studying the game so deeply that you see angles others are blind to. It's about developing skills that give you leverage, skills that turn you into the person people seek when the stakes are high. When you reach this level, doors don't just open, people pull you through them. Negotiations shift in your favor. Opportunities multiply. Your name carries weight. Your voice carries authority. Most people underestimate how dangerously influential mastery makes you. When you know something at a level others cannot match, you gain a psychological advantage. You gain confidence that cannot be faked, respect that cannot be bought, and positioning that cannot be easily replaced. Mastery elevates your income, yes, but more importantly, it elevates your power. It gives you control over your path, your opportunities, your destiny. Because when you master the right skills, the world no longer dictates your value. You dictate it. Fear is the invisible chain that keeps most people trapped in financial slavery. They don't just work for money, they cling to it as if losing $1 means losing their identity. This fear shapes every decision they make. They avoid risks that could elevate them. They tolerate disrespect because they're terrified of rocking the boat. They stay silent in situations where they should assert themselves. In the eyes of Machiavelli, this is the mentality of someone ruled, not someone who rules. Because the person who fears loss is always controlled by the possibility of losing. Money has a psychological grip on people because they believe their security depends on it. Erich Fromm explains that modern society feeds this fear deliberately. People are conditioned to feel incomplete without constant accumulation. You should want more, earn more, buy more. But the more you cling to money emotionally, the more fragile you become. A single setback can shatter you. A single financial hit can collapse your confidence. A single unexpected expense can send you spiraling. Fear weakens your judgment, and weak judgment destroys power. But emotional immunity changes everything. Emotional immunity means understanding that money is a tool, not your identity, not your safety, not your worth. When you stop fearing loss, you stop making decisions from desperation. You begin thinking strategically. You start taking calculated risks that others are too scared to attempt. The less you fear losing money, the more clearly you see opportunities. You negotiate harder. You walk away easier. You move with a calm edge that makes people wonder what you know that they don't. Machiavelli would say that the ruler who fears loss invites manipulation, but the ruler who stands unshaken by risk becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is a form of power. When people cannot control you through fear, they cannot control you at all. Emotional immunity is not about being reckless. It is about being unbreakable. It is about recognizing that your ability to rebuild is worth more than what you currently possess. It is about trusting your strength more than your savings. Because once you stop fearing the loss of money, the world loses its ability to intimidate you. Most people don't realize how easily their identity becomes trapped inside the numbers that define their life. Their salary becomes their self-worth. Their job title becomes their personality. Their income bracket becomes their pride or their shame. And without noticing, they slowly become a product of their earnings instead of the architect of their destiny. Machiavelli understood that when a person's identity is tied to something external and unstable, they are easily controlled. And nothing is more unstable, more unpredictable, more vulnerable to circumstance than money. Society reinforces this trap from the moment you begin working. People ask what you do before they ask who you are. They judge your lifestyle before they assess your character. They evaluate your success based on what you can display, not who you have become internally. Erich Fromm warns that this obsession with having instead of being is a psychological prison. You start to measure your life through possessions, cars, clothes, gadgets, status symbols, believing these things give you meaning. But every time you depend on an external label to define yourself, you step deeper into dependency. You become someone who lives for validation, not purpose. Machiavelli would tell you that power requires internal solidity. A ruler does not collapse when the treasury fluctuates. A strategist does not crumble when resources shift. A powerful mind is rooted in discipline, resilience, and clarity, not in earnings. When you detach your identity from money, you gain a strength most people will never experience. You no longer make decisions to protect your ego. You make decisions to protect your future. You no longer fear changing paths because you don't fear how it will look. You no longer cling to the familiar out of insecurity. When your identity is stronger than your circumstances, circumstances can change without touching your core. You can lose a job and not lose your confidence. You can face setbacks and not feel destroyed. You can rebuild because who you are is more powerful than what you currently have. And ironically, this inner solidity is what attracts greater opportunities. People follow those who are grounded. They trust those who don't depend on titles. They respect those who carry themselves with dignity, even when they have nothing to prove. In a world obsessed with speed, everyone wants the shortcut, the quick win, the viral moment, the overnight success story they can post online to feel superior for a few days. But Machiavelli would call this the mindset of a fool, someone intoxicated by appearance instead of substance. Fast money is loud, unstable, and ego-driven. It gives you a temporary high but leaves you with no foundation. It impresses the crowd, but it doesn't secure your future. And the more you chase quick wins, the easier you are to manipulate, because your hunger makes you predictable. The long game is different. The long game is where true power lives. Erich Fromm explains that modern society pushes people toward instant gratification because impatient minds are easier to control. When you crave speed, you accept scraps. When you crave validation, you lower your standards. When you crave quick results, you rely on luck instead of strategy. But when you shift your thinking to the long game, you rise above the emotional chaos that keeps most people broke and reactive. Playing the long game means you no longer chase money. You build systems, skills, and positioning that make money chase you. You no longer care about looking successful next week. You care about being unshakable in 5 years. You no longer jump on every opportunity. You choose the ones that multiply your leverage. And slowly, your life begins to reflect strength instead of noise, stability instead of flexing, power instead of panic. Machiavelli would remind you that rulers who think short-term lose their kingdoms. Leaders who panic in the moment destroy their legitimacy. But those who see beyond the immediate, who can delay gratification, who can endure the slow, quiet seasons where the foundation is built, they become untouchable. They become the ones others eventually bow to, because while everyone else was chasing quick wins, they were building something that lasts. The long game transforms you. It sharpens your discipline, deepens your judgment, and protects you from the emotional traps that destroy most people. Because when you stop needing fast results, you become dangerous in a way that no one can predict or rush. You begin to operate on a level where patience is power, restraint is strategy, and every move is a step toward an empire, not a momentary thrill. Most people live their lives surrounded by people who make them feel comfortable, friends who flatter them, colleagues who reassure them, communities that echo their beliefs. Society calls this belonging, networking, or maintaining harmony, but Machiavelli would call it dangerous weakness. Because comfort is the enemy of growth, and proximity to power, not ease, is the true currency of influence. Aligning with comfort keeps you small, average, predictable. Aligning with power positions where decisions are made, influence is exercised, and leverage can be claimed. Think about it. If your circle is only made up of people who never challenge you, who never demand more, who never push boundaries, you will never grow beyond their limitations. Erich Fromm would say that society trains people to avoid conflict, to avoid discomfort, to avoid the risk of friction. People cling to the familiar because it is safe, because it does not threaten their fragile sense of security. But safe rarely makes anyone extraordinary. Ordinary lives are safe lives. Mediocre lives are comfortable lives. Powerful lives are uncomfortable at times because they require alignment with forces that are stronger, smarter, and more ambitious than you. Strategic relationships are not about being liked. They are about positioning. They are about understanding that influence comes not from agreement, but from proximity to people who hold authority, vision, and resources. When you surround yourself with those who are dangerous in their thinking, decisive in their action, and relentless in their pursuit, your own capacity grows. You absorb standards, perspectives, and insights that transform your ability to act and execute. You stop being reactive to circumstances and start being proactive in creating outcomes. Machiavelli would remind you that alliances, partnerships, and relationships are tools of power, not comfort. You do not align with people to feel good about yourself. You align with people who elevate your leverage, who challenge your mind, who test your discipline, who sharpen your strategy. Because the wrong circle is a trap that keeps you average, and the right circle is the ladder that elevates you into influence, authority, and control. Most people chase visibility. They believe that success is measured by what others notice. They post their achievements online, brag about small victories, and announce their plans before they're ready. Society trains you to measure yourself through the gaze of others, to seek validation publicly, to feel worthy only when applause arrives. But Machiavelli knew that the loudest people are often the weakest. Real power is forged in the unseen hours, in the private wars that nobody witnesses, in the relentless effort that does not require recognition. Discipline that is invisible is the backbone of dominance. Erich Fromm explains that society encourages superficial action because it keeps people dependent. People who act for visibility act for approval. They make decisions to impress, not to win. They spend energy performing, not building, and the result is fragile achievement that collapses under scrutiny or adversity. But those who embrace invisible discipline understand a brutal truth: nobody cares about your process. They only care about your results. And results, when executed with ruthless consistency, speak louder than words ever could. Invisible discipline is about showing up even when no one is watching. It's about making choices that feel uncomfortable, delayed, and unrewarding in the short term because you understand that the long-term payoff is enormous. It's about working when it's quiet, sacrificing when it's inconvenient, and focusing when distractions scream for your attention. This is how wealth grows, influence spreads, and power consolidates. The difference between the average and the extraordinary is not talent or luck. It is the ability to endure in silence, to labor in obscurity, to commit to the relentless accumulation of skill, knowledge, and strategy that others cannot see. People will underestimate you, they will doubt you, they will ignore your work, and that is exactly the advantage of invisible discipline. Because by the time the world sees your results, you will have already built what they cannot hope to replicate. Most people don't realize how easily their life can be stolen, not physically, not through violence, but psychologically, emotionally, and strategically. Every decision you fail to make consciously, every opinion you adopt without questioning, every expectation you accept without challenge, is another brick in the cage that society, circumstance, and other people are building around you. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. A ruler who cannot command himself will be commanded by others. A person who does not assert control over their mind, their time, and their decisions will live at the mercy of someone else's ambitions. Society trains people to comply, to obey, to follow. You are told that stability comes from loyalty, that security comes from acquiescence, that happiness comes from doing what others expect. Erich Fromm observed that this is the trap of modern having consciousness. People surrender their autonomy to structures, authorities, and systems, believing that by following, they are safe. But safety is an illusion, and compliance is a slow death of agency. Every day you surrender choice is another day your potential is diminished. Every time you let someone else dictate your priorities, your purpose, your actions, you lose power without even realizing it. Sovereignty is the antidote. Sovereignty means you are the architect of your destiny. You earn money on your terms. You build relationships that serve your strategy. You spend time according to your mission. You make decisions that are aligned with your values, not the whims of others. Machiavelli would argue that a ruler who is sovereign in thought, emotion, and action cannot be manipulated, cannot be coerced, and cannot be controlled. Fromm would add that psychological independence is the foundation of a fulfilled life, because no external possession, position, or alliance can replace mastery over your own mind. Sovereignty requires courage. It demands that you resist the pull of comfort, the pressure to conform, the temptation to seek approval. It requires relentless self-examination and an unflinching commitment to act according to your strategy. Every step you take with sovereignty shifts the balance of power in your favor. Every boundary you enforce, every decision you assert, every risk you take under your own authority reinforces your position. When you own your life fully, others can no longer steal it, and the currents of society bend around your independence, rather than carrying you aimlessly wherever they will. The paradox of earning is this: most people work for money, but few understand that money should serve them, not the other way around. Society teaches fear, attachment, and dependence. But power demands detachment, strategy, and sovereignty. You have learned to create value, to detach from emotional chains, to become indispensable, to move in silence, to control scarcity, to master your craft, to withstand fear, to define your identity, to play the long game, to align with power, to build unseen discipline, and ultimately, to own your life. Now, the question is not how much you earn, but who controls your mind, your choices, your time, and your destiny. Every rule you implement chips away at the chains society has placed on you. Every principle you embrace shifts you from being reactive to being sovereign, from being a servant to being a strategist, from being a player to being the architect of the game. So I ask you now, with brutal honesty, which of these rules has stolen your power the longest? Which one have you ignored while letting the world dictate your life? Confront it, own it, and let this be the moment you reclaim what is rightfully yours.